Now, before we take a deep dive into the individual controls used to adjust your image, I think it's wise to take some time to look at the histogram in DxO PhotoLab. Some of you will be tempted to skip this lesson because you think you know the histogram already, and you probably do, but I think it'd be good to look at all the information available to you that you might not be aware of. And for those of you not familiar with the histogram, you definitely should pay a close attention to this lesson, because it affects how you shoot in the field and how you process. Now, the histogram really is the center of the universe in guiding your exposure and processing. And a histogram exists in just about every image manipulation program made, and it's also incorporated in just about every camera made. So you can do nothing but benefit by learning the histogram. Now, Histogram 101. The histogram is a visual representation of the brightness and the darkness of your image. It's really just as simple as that. And if we look at the upper right-hand corner of the workspace here, I'm going to click on the luminance display and show you what this means. Now, on the right is the bright area of the image, and on the left is the dark area of the image. Your goal when shooting is to drive this graph as far to the right without actually hitting the right border of the graph. That's very simple. You don't care about what the histogram looks like. You don't care about what the shape is. All you care about is that that leading white edge is getting as close to the right border of the graph as you can without actually touching it. Now, what happens when you touch it? Okay, now if we look at the histogram display in DxO PhotoLab, we have this little sun icon and the moon icon. Now, the moon stands for darkness. If we click on the moon, we see that we are indeed not clipping anywhere in the dark areas of the image. And we can confirm that by looking at the display, and we can see that there is a gap between the left border and where the graph begins, which means that tells us that we have all the detail in the darker areas of the image. Conversely, if we click on the bright area, we see several areas of the image that are blown out. And as you would expect, the sunlight, the absolute sun, is completely blown out. There is no detail in there, which you would expect when shooting into the sun. This area of the clouds up here is also blown out, and this area up here is blown out. Now, I purposely did this to try to get a little bit of exposure to these darker foreground elements, and then I did subsequent exposures on other shots in order to possibly bring the two of these together in Photoshop to combine them so that I can incorporate some detail in the foreground. Well, as it turns out, if we go back to the bright image, there's not a whole lot here that's going to add to the image. There's nothing in here like a windmill or a cow or a deer or anything of that nature. So it's kind of blah. So we're not going to even mess with that process. But when you're in the field, go ahead and shoot it. You can never lose anything by shooting it, because if there's something in here that you didn't see, like maybe a farm tractor or a nice barn or something, that when you get in and you look at it in your software, you go, wow, that's cool. I want to put that in the image. Then you can combine these for a balanced exposure. Okay. Now, if we look at the darker image, we see that, yes, we are blowing out the sun. But if we look at the histogram, we say, no, well, the right edge is only right here. So why is this blown out? Look at this corner. See that tiny white, looks like a dot right there? That tiny white dot is displaying this area right here. It represents a tiny fraction of the total area of the image, and so that's why this little area right here is so tiny. The rest of the image is severely underexposed, which is obvious. And indeed, if we click on the dark indicator, we have these blue areas, and we're blowing out detail in the dark areas. Again, we don't care what the histogram looks like. All we care is that this edge goes as far over as it possibly can without actually touching. Now, we're going to dismiss the fact that we're blowing out the sun, and let's take this off so that we can see it. We know that's going to be blown out, so that's a given, okay? In any image in this series, that's going to be blown out. But as we advance through the evolution of the sunset, and the sun drops below the horizon, then we have this situation, okay? Now we have a situation that we don't have any blown out areas. Let's take a look. And we got a tiny little one down here, but I think we can live with that. And then this area here, we have some down here. So from a purely technical standpoint, and again, if we look at it really, really closely, we can see that it is a tiny amount of gap right here. There's a gap right here, but don't worry about gaps in the middle. It doesn't matter whatsoever. This is completely black, and it's representing this foreground element right here. And then from here to here is reading the top. So that's what a histogram looks like when you have such severe lighting represented in your image. So let's take a look at some other images, and we're going to scroll through, and let's look at, and we're going to keep going here, and we're going to come to this series of images right here that are obviously red. Now, if I click on this one right here, and we look at the histogram strictly from the luminosity measurement, it's way underexposed, and anybody can see that by simply looking at it. But it's really brilliant. I mean, it's an abstract of a sunset, but there's a lot of color in here. If we click on the active correction and we look at what we did to the image before we displayed it here, let's look around and see. I'm going to take this off because we don't need noise reduction on a 100 ISO image. So we did not boost the saturation at all on this image. And let's look at the different RGB, red, green, and blue. We can also look at the level of reds in the image, which obviously overwhelms the image. Greens, not so much. There's not very much green in here at all, and even less blue, which is okay because it's not a blue image. And if we look at the luminance, then we can see that it is severely underexposed, but it works underexposed. Now, let me tell you why it does work. If we click on the red, this is perfectly exposed, okay? If we boost the saturation, see how the leading edge, the right leading edge of that red color section begins to brighten and move to the right? Now, if we do something stupid like keep going, and now we see in the histogram is telling us that we have blown out areas of red color in a red image, that's not good because we lose detail in those areas of the image. And we can see that that's true here, 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 and all these different areas. We've now blown out of the red color. So let's bring this down and watch how that returns over here, and now we have detail in those areas that were previously blown out by my misapplication of the saturation slider. So there is value in looking at each individual color to make sure that, especially if you're going to print this image, I mean, that's especially good if you're going to print. Don't be afraid of an underexposed image. I mean, I used to think, okay, we have to balance this exposure. So you'd come down here and you'd push this over, and you'd push this over, and you'd push this over until it reaches, and now what do you got? You got an ugly mess, okay? Even though it's not touching the luminance section over here, in the reds, it's blown out completely. The greens, of course, are never going to be blown out, nor are the blues. But the reds are completely washed out and blown out, and you've ruined your image. So it's not just what the luminance display shows you, it's what each individual color shows you. So let's bring this back down to normal, and now we have an image that looks the way it's supposed to, even though it is basically overall underexposed. It still works because you have detail in the predominant color in the image. So one more thing to take a look at is that if you want to look at all three colors superimposed at the same time, you just click on RGB. And again, to review, R is for red, green is for blue, green is for green, and blue, and B is for blue. And then L is for overall luminance. We have the sunshine to give you a display of blown out highlights and blown out dark areas. And look at all the blown out dark areas of the image, which we would expect, and it's okay because it's not the primary focus of the image. Don't worry about it. So there's the histogram in DxO PhotoLab.